Before the United States became the country we know today, before the Founding Fathers wrote a single word on parchment, there was another America. An empire so vast, so organized, and so wealthy that at its peak it rivaled medieval European kingdoms. Yet today, most Americans have never heard its name. No ruins towering over the land. No surviving dynasties. No famous battles in textbooks. Just silence. Because this empire didn't slowly fade. It vanished. Completely. And its capital city was once the largest urban center in North America. Our story begins nearly 1,000 years ago, long before the arrival of Columbus, long before the first colonies were imagined. In the very heart of the modern United States, what is today Illinois, there rose a city called Cahokia. Not a village, not a tribe, but a true metropolis, covering more land than medieval London. To outsiders we say Cahokia, but the real name of the empire has been lost to history. The Mississippian people who built it left no written records the way the Egyptians or Chinese did. But they left clues, earthworks the size of pyramids, a city grid, astronomical observatories, and signs of an elite ruling class that controlled a massive territory stretching across the Mississippi River Valley. This is the empire that existed inside the land we now call the United States, before the United States existed. So how did a civilization in the middle of the continent rise to such power? It began with location. The Mississippi River was the superhighway of North America, a natural trade route running from the Great Lakes in the north to the Gulf of Mexico in the south. Where rivers met, goods met. Where goods met, people met. Where people met, cities were born. Around the year 1050, Cahokia exploded in size. Archaeologists call this the Big Bang moment. A sudden population boom where tens of thousands of people arrived from across the region. Farmers, artisans, astronomers, traders, all gathering under a new political and spiritual system that was unlike anything else in North America at the time. This wasn't random growth. It was organized, planned, engineered. Massive plazas were constructed. Residential neighborhoods were laid out. A central ruling class emerged, possibly a priest-king society. That controlled agriculture, religion, and long-distance trade. Cahokia had become the beating heart of a rising empire. At its height between 1100 and 1200 AD, Cahokia was a marvel. The city featured more than 120 man-made mounds, some functioning like pyramids, others like elite homes, temples, or ceremonial platforms. The biggest, Monk's Mound, was so massive that it remains the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas today. Its base is larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. This wasn't random dirt piling. It was architecture, layers upon layers of engineered soil transported by hand, basket by basket. Cahokia also built a solar calendar known today as Woodhenge, a precise astronomical circle used to track solstices and equinoxes, much like Stonehenge. Trade routes stretched thousands of miles. Seashells from the Gulf of Mexico, copper from the Great Lakes, mica from the Appalachian Mountains, even volcanic glass from the Rockies. And with trade came culture. Elaborate art featuring falcons, warriors, and celestial symbols. A complex religious system that connected the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. A social hierarchy that placed elites at the top of pyramid-like structures overlooking the city. Cahokia wasn't just a big city. It was a civilization with an identity, a mythology, and political power. And then, something happened. Something no historian fully agrees on. Something that turned this empire into the greatest historical mystery on US soil. By the early 1200s, Cahokia had become the dominant power in the Mississippi Valley. Tens of thousands lived within its borders. Trade routes flowed like lifelines to every corner of the continent. Everything pointed to a civilization still rising. Yet beneath the surface, pressure was building. Archaeologists found evidence of fortified walls, massive wooden palisades surrounding the central precinct. These weren't symbolic. They were defensive. Something, or someone, was threatening the empire. But who? There were no rival nations large enough at the time to challenge Cahokia directly. At least, none that we've discovered. So the theories become more mysterious. Theory number 1. Internal power struggle. Signs of violent trauma appear in some burial sites. Elite structures were rebuilt multiple times, sometimes burned scarred. That suggests political upheaval. Maybe competing factions, a coup, or civil conflict. A city this large needed strong leadership. If that leadership fractured, the empire could fracture with it. Theory number 2. Environmental stress. Cahokia relied on intensive agriculture. Corn was the engine that fueled everything, from population to politics. But pollen samples show repeated cycles of flood and drought. Rivers changed course. Crops failed. And when food becomes uncertain, empires become fragile. Theory number 3. A stranger mystery. The cultural shift. Around this time, Cahokians began building new mounds with different designs, new artwork with different symbols, and new burial styles that seemed to reflect a sudden ideological shift. It's as if the entire belief system that held the empire together started to unravel. But here is the strangest part. None of these theories fully explain what happened next. Because Cahokia didn't just weaken. It entered. Like a city whose population simply stood up and walked away. Imagine a city bigger than London, filled with markets, temples, neighborhoods, astronomers, farmers, traders, and then, over the span of a few generations, gone. By the year 1350, Cahokia was abandoned. No invading army. No epic final battle. No flames, no mass graves, no takeover by outside forces. Just a silent, sprawling metropolis slowly swallowed by grass and trees. So what truly caused the disappearance? The multi-collapse theory. Most historians now believe it wasn't one event, but a cascade. Environmental instability, political fragmentation, resource exhaustion, overpopulation, shifts in trade routes, social or religious upheaval. Think of it like a row of dominoes. Anyone could fall without destroying the empire. But once several toppled together, the system could no longer sustain itself. People likely dispersed outward into smaller communities. Some moved south into the lower Mississippi regions. Some integrated with tribes later known as the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Quapaw, Osage. Others vanished into the historical fog. Cahokia, the largest city in pre-Columbian North America, faded from memory long before Europeans arrived. By the time the US became a nation, the empire under its feet had already been gone for 400 years. And almost nobody remembered it existed. 4 centuries after its disappearance, Cahokia lived only in whispers. Faint memories carried by descendant peoples, stories without written language, echoes without context. European settlers who later saw the massive mounds refused to believe Native Americans had built them. Some claimed they were made by Vikings, others by a lost race. Some even suggested ancient Egyptians crossed the ocean. The truth was so unexpected, people simply couldn't imagine that an indigenous civilization in the heart of North America could engineer a metropolis. But the legacy didn't vanish. It simply lay buried. Literally. In the 1800s and early 1900s, excavators finally began uncovering the reality. A highly organized society with astronomical science, long-distance trade, specialized labor, engineering sophistication, and political complexity. This forced historians to rewrite what they believed about the continent. And here's the surprising part. Cahokia reshaped the United States in ways almost nobody notices. Number 1. City planning. The grid-like layout, centralized plazas, and ceremonial architecture influenced urban patterns in later indigenous settlements. Some scholars argue these traditions indirectly shaped early colonial planning in the Midwest and South. Number 2. Agricultural innovation. Cahokia's corn-based economy drove widespread cultivation practices still used in the region centuries later. Number 3. Cultural traces in modern tribes. Myths of sky spirits, underworlds, and sacred birds persist in descendant tribes like the Osage and Choctaw, mythology that likely originated or evolved during the Mississippian era. Number 4. The mystery it left behind. Cahokia's disappearance became one of the great archaeological puzzles of America, a reminder that history is full of vanished powers, not just the famous ones from textbooks. But the greatest legacy is this. Cahokia proves that the land under the United States was once home to its own homegrown empire, an indigenous civilization with achievements equal to any in the world. Not a footnote, not a myth, not a tribal campsite, but a true ancient American power. Today, if you stand on top of Monk's Mound in Illinois, you don't see a bustling city. You see grass, highways, neighborhoods, a horizon that once held temples, markets, and tens of thousands of lives. The silence feels heavy. Because you're standing on the capital of a forgotten empire. An empire that rose through innovation, thrived on trade and cosmology, faced pressures it couldn't survive, and then dissolved into the landscape so completely that centuries later, most Americans would never know it existed. And yet, if you listen closely, you can almost hear echoes of what once was. The footsteps of builders carrying baskets of soil, the chants of priests at sunrise, the marketplace sounds of traders from distant coasts, and the heartbeat of a city that refused to be ordinary. Cahokia isn't just a chapter of American history. It is American history, a reminder that greatness can rise anywhere and vanish just as quickly.